They called him a beast, a brute, a man better left alone. But when the widow knocked with nowhere to go and a daughter to protect, the mountain answered, not with silence but with shelter and something like love. The first time Nora Granger saw the man they called Brant, he was dragging a dead elk across the snow with nothing but his back and a rope tied around his chest. No horse, no sled, just strength. Folks in the town of Alder Fork said he wasn't right in the head, that he'd lived alone up in Deadman's Ridge too long, that he ate raw meat and spoke to ghosts. They said you could smell him before you saw him, and that his mother had been struck by lightning and birthed him in a cave. But all Nora saw was a man too strong for his own good, with eyes that didn't ask for help and shoulders that looked like they carried pain longer than they'd carried meat. She watched from the edge of the mercantile porch, her daughter Eden tucked behind her skirt, whispering, "Mama, is that him? The one they all laugh at?" Nora didn't answer. She just stared at the man until he passed, never looking her way, never saying a word. She noticed the limp in his left leg, subtle but there. She noticed the scars across the backs of his knuckles, the kind you don't get from work but from being struck or striking back. He passed by like a ghost with a pulse, and the town resumed its buzzing once he was gone, as if silence had trailed him and they were only now allowed to speak again. That night Nora packed what was left: a cracked kettle, a Bible missing the last few pages, Eden's only doll, and the letter from her brother that said the land out west was ripe for claim if she could make it past the pass before spring melt. She didn't say goodbye to the town. She didn't owe them that. Not after the way they'd turned their eyes when her husband coughed blood onto the church steps and the preacher didn't even pause his sermon. They said she should have remarried quick, that a woman with a child and no man was just a burden waiting to snap. But Nora had snapped a long time ago. She just didn't show it. They left at dawn. No horse, just a wagon she could pull herself, and Eden tucked beneath blankets, teeth chattering. They followed the trail out toward the ridge where trees grew thick and the land forgot men ever tried to tame it. The wind cut like knives, and by noon snow began to fall again. The sky closed like a lid. By the second day the trail was gone, just white, endless, cruel white. Nora's hands were raw, her feet bled in her boots. Eden stopped asking where they were going. She just shivered, eyes dull, cheeks wind-burnt and red as bruises. When the cabin appeared, more shadow than structure, Nora didn't know if it was real. Smoke curled from the chimney barely. A single lantern flickered in the window. The path to the door was half buried in snow. She left the wagon. She picked up Eden, legs screaming from the weight, and climbed the drift to the porch. She knocked. Once. Twice. 3 times. Nothing. She was about to knock again when the door creaked open, and there he was, Brant, bigger up close, darker in the doorway than he was in the street. He looked at her, then at the child in her arms, then back at her. His face didn't move. No recognition, no surprise, just that same flat gaze. "I can't go any farther," Nora whispered, voice nearly gone. "Please." He stepped aside. That was it, no word, just space. She stepped in. The warmth hit her like a wave. The fire was low but real. The cabin was sparse, wooden walls, shelves with jars, a cot, a table, a chair too small for him. It smelled of pine smoke and something faintly metallic like old blood and iron. Brant shut the door behind them. Eden whimpered. Nora nearly collapsed. He caught her elbow before she fell, held it gently, then pointed to the cot. She laid Eden down and knelt beside her, pulling the blanket tight. Her daughter's lips were turning blue. Brant disappeared into another room and returned with a thick pelt, bare maybe, and wrapped it around Eden without a word. He stirred the fire. He poured something hot into a tin cup and handed it to Nora. She drank without asking what it was. It burned her throat and woke something in her chest. Finally he spoke. "You'll die out there." Nora looked up. "I know." He sat across from her, still not blinking. "Why'd you come?" "Because I heard you didn't ask questions." A long silence passed, then a grunt, Then, not usually. She could have laughed, but her lips were too cracked. She just nodded, held the cup close, and listened to the fire crackle. Eden stirred, murmured something in sleep. Brant didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on Nora like he was trying to solve something he'd never seen before. She didn't flinch. She was past fear, past shame. All that was left was Eden and the fire and the man they called a monster who hadn't turned them away. Morning came like a thief, slow and gray. Nora woke to find Brant already outside, splitting wood barehanded in the cold. Eden was still sleeping, cheeks pink now, fingers curled gently around the fur. Nora stepped out onto the porch. Brant didn't look at her. "You didn't ask who I was," she said. He didn't pause, didn't matter. "Why not?" He split a log. Only thing that mattered was the child. Nora swallowed, her hands clenched at her sides. "We can't stay long." "No," he agreed, "you can't." But he didn't say when. Back inside, she cleaned the hearth, boiled water, fed Eden crushed oats from a jar she found on a shelf. The girl smiled faintly for the first time in days. "He's scary," Eden whispered. "No," Nora said, watching him through the window. "He's not." By the third day, the storm returned. Heavy snow, fast and wet. Wind that screamed down the chimney. Brant secured the windows with boards. He hung a blanket over the door. He added logs to the fire until it roared. They sat in silence as the storm beat the walls. "You fought in the war?" Nora asked. He nodded once. "Which side?" He didn't answer. "Doesn't matter," she said quickly. "Just wondered if that's where the limp came from." It didn't. She didn't ask more. He rose and fetched a small wooden box. Inside was a collection of whittled animals, bears, deer, birds. He handed one to Eden, a tiny fox. She gasped, "Can I keep it?" He nodded. She clutched it to her chest. "He could protect us forever, Mama." Nora met Brant's eyes across the room. He looked away. By the fourth night, someone knocked. A real knock. Firm, measured, male. Brant rose instantly, grabbed the rifle from above the hearth, and moved to the door. He didn't open it, just called out, "Ain't no one here you want." A voice answered, low, laughing, "Oh, I think there is." Brant looked to Nora. Her face drained of color. She whispered, "That voice, I know it." Brant cocked the rifle. Outside, boots shuffled. Metal clinked, more than one man. Brant backed away from the door. "You need to take the girl," he said. "Go into the back room, lock it. Don't come out unless I come for you." Nora didn't argue. As she pulled Eden close and moved toward the darkened hallway, she heard the voice again, closer now. "Nora, you really think you could run this far?" The door rattled. Brant stood alone before it, shoulders squared. The storm howled louder, like the wind itself held its breath. The door shuddered beneath the knock, heavier now, more deliberate, like the knuckles behind it no longer cared for manners. Brant didn't flinch. His hand gripped the rifle, but his posture was still, his breathing calm. Outside, snow hissed against the window panes, the wind dragging sleet across the roof like claws scraping a coffin lid. But it was the voice that made the room colder than the mountain air. "Nora," it drawled again, "I know you're in there, and I know you're listening. Come out, girl, let's not play games." From the back room, behind the cracked door, Nora pressed Eden's head to her chest and closed her eyes. That voice had once whispered sweet promises in the dark, had once told her she was beautiful with blood on her cheek and bruises on her neck. Jed Cartwright. He wasn't a man. He was a curse stitched into her life with the thread of regret. And he'd found them. The rifle's barrel tilted slightly as Brant moved closer to the door, now just a whisper away. He said nothing. His shadow stretched long behind him, firelight flickering like the heart of a beast behind his silent form. For a breath, everything paused. Then the handle turned. Locked. A beat. Then a boot struck the wood. Brant waited until the second kick before he moved. Calm, smooth. He pulled the door brace into place, a thick iron rod hidden in the wall, and dropped it across the latch. The next kick hit harder but didn't budge it. "You got company," Jed's voice grew colder. "That ain't wise." Another voice joined him, younger, lighter. "That's the old Ridge brute's place, ain't it? They say he eats wolves." Jed chuckled. "He don't eat wolves, but he ain't right either, which means he's not smart enough to know when to give up what ain't his." Inside, Brant knelt by the fire. He reached behind the hearthstones, lifting a loose plank with practiced ease. From the hollow inside, he pulled a second rifle, a heavy revolver, and a tin box of ammunition. Quietly, he loaded both weapons, eyes never leaving the door. In the back room, Eden whispered, "Mama, who is that?" Nora couldn't speak at first. She was trying to keep her hands from shaking, her mind from snapping. But Eden needed more than silence. "Someone I used to know," she whispered, voice taut as a drawn wire. "Someone I prayed we'd never see again." Outside, Boots circled the cabin. 3 men now, maybe 4. Brant opened the small window beside the hearth and peered through the frost-glazed pane. Shapes moved in the snow, shadows against shadows. He could see the glint of a rifle barrel. One was making his way toward the rear. He moved to the back room. Nora tensed as the door eased open. "It's me," Brant said simply. He handed her the revolver. Her fingers didn't want to take it. "I don't." "You do now." She stared at him, eyes brimming but unblinking. "They'll kill you." Brant's voice was level. "Not if I kill them first." He turned back before she could say more. She stared at the revolver heavy in her hand. It had been years since she held one. Jed had made sure of that. He said women didn't need weapons, only obedience and bruises. But that was a different woman. That was a different Nora. She checked the chamber, full. Outside, a voice yelled, "We're coming in, Mountain Man. Open up or we light this place like a bonfire." Brant spoke then, voice deep and clear through the door. "You light a match, you'll die before the flame catches." Another voice, a cocky one, laughed. "You threatening us, freak." Brant didn't answer. He didn't need to. He moved to the front window, cracked it slightly, and watched as one of the shadows broke off and circled to the side. Another stood guard with a rifle across the trail, watching for movement. They weren't outlaws. Not trained ones. They didn't move like soldiers. They moved like men used to getting their way by force, which meant they weren't ready for someone who'd learned to fight not to win, but to survive. Brant waited until the one near the window stepped close, leaning to peer inside. Then, with a suddenness that broke the silence like a shot, he slammed the butt of his rifle through the window, striking the man square in the face. Glass shattered. Blood sprayed across the sill. The man crumpled without a sound, buried in snow. That was one down. The second tried the back door. Brant was already there. He waited until the latch clicked, then slammed the door forward, catching the intruder mid-step. The man stumbled. Brant grabbed him by the collar and yanked him inside like hauling game from a trap. Before the man could scream, Brant drove his fist into the side of his head. Once. Twice. He collapsed, moaning. 2 down. Gunshots fired outside now, wild, aimless. Nora flinched, covering Eden with her body. Brant crouched beside the window, watching the third man, Jed Cartwright, yelling, backing away, rifle raised. "You killed my men, you filthy hermit." Brant said nothing. Jed's eyes darted toward the cabin, toward the smoke still curling from the chimney. His lips curled. "You've got her in there, don't you, my Nora?" He spat. "You can keep the brat. She was always more trouble than she was worth, but Nora's mine, always was." Brant's hand tensed. Inside the back room, Nora felt her breath hitch. Eden clung to her, silent now, eyes wide. Jed's voice rose, desperate and ugly. She belonged to me before your stink ever reached this ridge. Brant opened the door slowly, rifle in one hand. Jed spun toward the sound, raising his weapon. Too slow. Brant fired once. Jed's hat flew off. Snow exploded behind him as he dropped, screaming, clutching his shoulder. The shot hadn't killed him, but it had ended the fight. Brant walked toward him, boots crunching slow through the snow. Jed scrambled, slipped, crawled back toward the trees. Don't, he gasped. Don't shoot, I'll leave. Brant stood over him, rifle lowered. She's not yours, he said simply. She never was. Jed's face twisted. She's nothing, she's. Brant raised the butt of the rifle. Jed flinched. Then he passed out. Brant left him in the snow, stripped his rifle, tossed it into the trees, and returned to the cabin. Nora met him at the door, revolver still in hand. He's gone, Brant said. Her hands trembled. Are you hurt? He shook his head. She stared at him a long time, then handed the revolver back. He didn't take it. You should keep it, he said. You might need it again. She nodded slowly, closing her fingers around the cold metal. That night they buried the man whose face Brant had shattered through the window. The other one came to with a broken jaw and broken ribs. Brant packed his horse with rations and pointed it south. If he turns around, Brant told him, you won't get back on. The man didn't speak, couldn't. He rode away. The snow fell again. Nora stayed up late that night watching the fire burn low. Brant sat across from her carving a new figure, a bear this time, strong, still, guarding. She spoke first. I ran from Jed 3 years ago. Thought I'd made it out west far enough. Thought if I changed towns, changed names, I could change my story too. Brant didn't interrupt. She looked at the revolver on the table. Didn't count on him being stubborn. Didn't count on him being willing to die for control. Brant nodded once. Some men only feel alive when someone else is scared. She met his eyes. Thank you, she said. He didn't respond right away. Then softly, you don't owe me anything. But I do, she whispered. You gave me something no one else ever did. He raised an eyebrow. Shelter, she said, without judgment, without questions. Brant stared into the fire. I've had enough questions for a lifetime. Silence settled. Not heavy. Comfortable. Eden came out from the back room, rubbing her eyes. She climbed onto Brant's lap without hesitation, curling against his chest. He froze. Then slowly, one massive hand cradled her back. Nora watched them both. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like running. The days that followed were wrapped in silence, not the cold kind that presses in from the mountains and makes the bones ache, but a quiet rooted in something deeper, a silence of healing, a silence of new rhythms forming beneath old wounds. Nora didn't ask Brant if they were welcome to stay. He never said they could, never said they couldn't. But he brought in more firewood, cleared a second cot from a storage room that hadn't seen light in years, and began carving small things for Eden each evening. An owl, a horse, a fox with a tilted head. Nora washed their clothes in the basin, mended old tears in the threadbare curtains, swept corners Brant hadn't looked at in months. She didn't intrude, didn't rearrange. She simply blended in with quiet hands and a firm voice when needed. She kept Eden's laughter soft, made sure her own presence stayed respectful of the space that had held one man's solitude for so long. But it didn't take long for that space to bend. On the 4th morning, Nora woke to the sound of Eden's giggles. Brant, in his usual silence, was letting the girl brush his wild beard with a crude wooden comb, and though his face showed no smile, there was something in the way he sat so still that made Nora's heart tighten. He wasn't just tolerating them. He was letting them in. Later that day, As the sun cracked through the gray skies and bathed the cabin in weak warmth, Brant began repairing the roof. The old shingles had buckled under snow weight, and while they hadn't yet leaked, the thaw was coming. Nora stood below, handing up nails and wood scraps, watching how deftly he moved even with that limp in his leg. "You don't ask much," he said suddenly, voice drifting down to her like a low wind. She shielded her eyes from the glare. "You mean compared to most?" He nodded. "I figure you've earned your quiet," she said. Brant paused in hammering. "Most folks want stories, want reasons." Nora looked back toward the cabin. "I've got my own, don't need anyone else's." That night the air shifted. A softness rolled in with the melting snow. The mountain whispered less harshly through the trees. Birds returned, just one or two, their songs timid, unsure of winter's retreat. Nora sat on the porch, Eden curled in her lap, watching the world change. Brant joined her without a word, sitting a short distance away, boots resting against the top step, arms crossed. The quiet between them wasn't tense. It was shared, understood. After a while, Eden, half asleep, whispered, "Mama, do you think he'd come with us? If we went west?" Nora didn't answer. Her eyes flicked to Brant's face, but he didn't look at her, didn't react. She kissed her daughter's forehead. "Sleep now." Brant stood after that, retreating into the cabin, and Nora felt the cold creep back into the air. She couldn't blame him. He'd given more already than any man had since her husband died, more than her husband ever had if she was honest with herself, and she was beginning to wonder if staying in that cabin might not be such a terrible thing after all. The next day, trouble came in the form of smoke. Not from their hearth. From the ridge to the east. Brant saw it first, rising thin and dark against the pale sky. He stood stock-still outside the cabin, axe in hand, lips parted just slightly. Nora came up beside him, holding Eden's small hand. She followed his gaze. "That's not storm smoke," she murmured. "No," he said. "It's a campfire, big one." "Trappers." "Maybe." She felt the hairs rise on the back of her neck. "Or Jed's friends." Brant didn't reply, but his jaw clenched and he turned back to the cabin. Within minutes, he had the rifle cleaned and loaded. He packed dry food into a satchel, filled 2 canteens, and strapped a knife to his belt. Nora stood near the door, watching him prepare. "You're going to them." "Need to know who they are." "I'm coming." He looked at her sharply. "No. I have a gun, I'm not useless." "You have a child." "She'll stay here. I'm not letting you face this alone." For a long moment he just stared at her. Then he nodded once. Eden protested, "Mama." Nora knelt beside her, cupping her face. "You'll stay inside. Lock the doors. Don't open them unless it's me or Brant. Understand?" Tears welled in the girl's eyes, but she nodded. Nora kissed her, hugged her tightly, then rose and followed Brant into the trees. The climb toward the ridge was quiet but grueling. The snow had softened but still fought their steps, and the cold hadn't fully relented. Brant led the way, sure-footed even with the limp, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon. After nearly 2 hours, they reached a vantage point. Below, in a hollow framed by trees, a group of 5 men huddled around a roaring fire, horses tied nearby, heavy coats, guns stacked in the snow. Brant crouched, motioning for Nora to stay low. She scanned the group. "You recognize any?" He nodded at the tallest. "Name's Finch, rode with Cartwright once, ran with a posse down south, robbery turned ugly, heard they left a town burning." Nora's stomach turned. "They're hunting us." "Maybe, or maybe they're just moving through." "We can't take chances." Brant agreed. He studied the terrain, looked for options, traps, timing. Then below, one of the men stood and tossed something into the fire. "A coat. A child's coat." Nora froze, her breath caught. "That's..." Brant finished, voice hard. Nora's eyes went wild. No, no, she was in the cabin, she. Brant stood. Without a word, he turned and began running back the way they came. Nora followed, boots slipping, lungs burning. They reached the cabin faster than they should have been able to, driven by something primal, something sharp and savage. The door was open. The window shattered. Inside, the quilt on the cot was overturned. Eden's doll lay on the floor, arm torn. Nora dropped to her knees, a sound escaping her throat that wasn't quite a scream, too broken, too breathless. Brant moved quickly, scanning the signs. Tracks in the snow, 3 sets, 1 heavy, 2 lighter. They hadn't killed her. They'd taken her. They'll head for the pass, Brant said. How do you know? It's where I would go if I needed to vanish. Nora stood, hands shaking. Then we follow. No, he said, turning to her. You stay here, I'll get her. You can't carry this alone. I'm not arguing. Neither am I. She grabbed the revolver from the shelf, stuffed ammunition into her coat pocket. Brant gave her one look, grim, steady, then nodded. Together, they stepped into the snow once more. The mountain doesn't care about justice. It doesn't care about right or wrong, innocence or guilt. It only cares who survives. Brant and Nora followed the trail for hours, then into night. The moon lit their path faintly, casting long shadows through the trees. The tracks veered toward the canyon, a shortcut but treacherous. They'll camp again before trying the pass, Brant said. The girl slows them. Nora's voice was tight. Good. They caught the scent of smoke again by dawn. This time they didn't wait. They came in fast, Brant from one side, Nora from the other. It wasn't clean. It wasn't pretty. The first man dropped from Brant's bullet before he even drew. The second raised his rifle. Nora shot him in the leg, then in the chest. She didn't think, didn't breathe, she just fired. Finch screamed, dragging Eden by the arm. Brant tackled him hard, knocking them both into the snow. Eden rolled free, crying, scrambling toward Nora. Brant and Finch wrestled in the drift, fists flying, snarls ripping through the trees. Blood soaked the snow. Brant rose last, face bruised, knuckles torn, Finch unmoving. Eden sobbed into Nora's coat. Mama, Mama, I was so scared, he said. He said he'd hurt you if I didn't come. You're safe now, baby, Nora whispered, rocking her gently. You're safe. Brant stood over them, chest heaving. Nora looked up at him through tears. You found her, she whispered. No, he said, voice rough. You did. They buried the bodies. They burned what they couldn't carry. And when they returned to the cabin, Brant didn't just let them in. He set 3 places at the table. The smoke from the burial fire lingered in Brant's beard for days after, no matter how long he stayed out in the wind. Nora noticed it when he stood near. That scorched scent, reminder of what they'd done, what they'd survived. She didn't flinch from it, didn't recoil. That smoke, like the scars he bore, had become part of who they were now. Survivors, protectors. A strange kind of family forged not by blood but by fire, by snow, and by pain shared and endured together. Life returned to the cabin in quiet measures, not quickly, not cleanly, but it returned. Eden stopped waking up screaming. She still cried out sometimes, clinging to Nora's arm in the dark, but Brant's heavy footfall on the porch or the sound of his knife carving at the table was enough to settle her. She began humming again, soft, tuneless little things as she arranged pebbles outside the cabin in crooked shapes. She called the corner by the hearth her spot, and one morning Brant built her a tiny bench from scrap wood, low enough that her feet could rest flat on the floor. He didn't say a word as he set it down. She looked at it for a long moment, then hugged him without asking. He froze, stiff as old bark, but his hand came up to her back and rested there, gentle, steady. That evening, Nora lit a lamp early and began sewing by the window. The fabric was old, salvaged from a discarded curtain, but it was strong, and she used it to make a vest small enough for Eden to wear under her coat. Brant worked beside the fire, sharpening tools, his broad back casting shadows against the far wall. The silence felt almost holy. And when Eden fell asleep on the floor beside her fox carving, curled in the same bear pelt Brant had first wrapped her in, Nora watched her daughter and whispered, "She's smiling in her sleep." Brant didn't look up. "Means she's not afraid," Nora added. Still, he said nothing. "You did that." The whetstone slowed, his hands stilled. Nora looked down at her stitching again, hiding her own shaking fingers. "I spent a lot of years running," she said, voice low. "Not just from Jed, from memories, from shame, from the guilt that I didn't see what kind of man he was until it was too late." Brant finally looked up. "I don't blame you," he said. "But I do," she replied. The fire cracked between them. Brant's voice was rough when he spoke again. "I fought in the war, got myself out of more ambushes than I can count. One day I was scouting a pass up north, snowed over, thought I was smart, took a shortcut, didn't see the second line of traps, lost half a patrol, 7 men. Nora lifted her eyes. "I carry that every day," Brant continued. "But I didn't see it coming, and I was supposed to, so I get it, blaming yourself for what you didn't know." She swallowed hard. Their eyes met again, not as strangers, not even as friends, something deeper, something forged through the hurt and the fire. After a long silence, Brant stood. He lifted Eden gently, carried her to the cot, and laid her down. Then he paused at the doorway, hand resting on the frame. "I was thinking," he said quietly, "come spring there's land just west of here. Quiet, flat enough to plant. River runs nearby." Nora's breath caught. He didn't turn. "Don't mean anything by it, just figure you might want to stay nearby, safer." "Would we be welcome?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Brant turned his head just slightly. "You already are." Spring came late to Deadman's Ridge. Snow melted slow, reluctant, revealing patches of stubborn green and rock-strewn earth. Birds returned in louder flocks, as if trying to outsing the silence winter had left behind. Brant took Eden fishing one morning. Nora watched them from the porch, her fingers gripping a mug of warm water. Eden talked non-stop, pointing at dragonflies, asking about bears, telling stories about dreams. Brant listened without speaking much, but he held the line when she tired and let her pretend she'd caught the fish herself. That night they ate around a proper table. Brant had built it over 2 days, long enough for 3 to sit together, thick-legged, solid, meant to last. Eden danced in circles when she saw it. "You built this for us." Brant scratched his beard. "Built it for eating. You happen to eat here." Nora smiled. Eden kissed his arm, then crawled under it and sat on the bench she now called hers. Nora laid out the fish, some wild greens and a slab of bread baked flat on the hearthstone. It wasn't much, but it felt like a feast. Halfway through the meal, a rider appeared. They didn't hear him at first. His horse came slow, careful, barely making noise on the thawing path. But Brant was already halfway to the door before Nora noticed the figure through the window. "Friend of yours?" she asked, rising, her voice tight. Brant shook his head. The man wore a brown duster, sun-bleached, and rode a mule with a pronounced limp in its hind leg. He dismounted with the ease of someone used to pain and approached the cabin without removing his hat. Brant stepped onto the porch, shotgun loosely in hand. The man stopped 10 paces from the steps. "I'm looking for a widow named Granger," he said. "Nora." Brant didn't move. "Who's asking?" The man reached into his coat slowly, pulling out a folded paper. "Letter, from her brother, sent from Dakota Territory. Been trying to track her for months." Brant took the letter, his eyes never leaving the man's. Inside, Nora stepped forward as Brant handed it to her. The paper was creased, the ink smudged from damp. Her breath caught as she recognized the handwriting. "Isaac," she whispered. She read the words aloud, her voice cracking. "Nora, I heard from a trapper you went west. I hope you and Eden are safe. I have land now, a claim. Come, if you can, I'll wait through spring. Longer if I have to. You're not alone anymore. Isaac." Her knees buckled slightly. Brant caught her elbow. Eden peered up from behind the doorframe. "Mama." Nora blinked back tears. "I thought he was gone," she said. "I thought." Brant looked at the rider. "You seen trouble on the trail?" "Some," the man replied. "But the roads are opening. No sign of outlaws near the pass." Brant nodded. That night Nora sat by the fire for a long time after Eden had gone to sleep. Brant carved another animal, a mountain lion this time, muscles coiled, teeth bared. "You'll go," he said without looking up. Nora stared into the flames. "I should." Brant didn't argue, didn't try to stop her. That made it worse. "You think it's safer," she said quietly, "better for her." "I think it's not my place to keep her from family." Nora turned to face him. "Brant." He looked up. She stared at him hard. "We are family." He didn't blink. "And I won't hold you from more of it." Tears welled again. She hated how easily they came now. "I never asked for this," she said. "Any of this." He nodded. "I know. But I'm glad it found me anyway." The carving slipped from his fingers, forgotten. They didn't speak again that night. 2 days later, Nora packed. It wasn't much: the coat she'd mended, the tin kettle, the doll with the torn arm, the revolver, a pouch of dried meat Bran had prepared, a fox carving, a small bench Eden refused to leave behind. Brant hitched a cart to the mule and prepared the trail. When the time came, he lifted Eden into the seat, then handed Nora the reins. She looked down at him, heart full of everything unsaid. "Thank you," she whispered. Brant stepped back. "I won't forget," she said. He nodded. Then Eden leaned down, eyes wet. "Are you coming with us?" Brant stared at her, at the small hands clutching the bench she dragged into the cart, at the mountain lion carving tucked beside her. "No," he said quietly, "not today." Eden's lip trembled. "But you could protect us forever." Brant's jaw tightened. He reached up and tucked a carved bird into her coat pocket. "Then I'll be there," he said. Nora met his gaze one last time. Then she turned the cart toward the trail. And Brant stood on the porch, watching until the trees swallowed them whole. Brant didn't go back inside after the cart disappeared into the trees. He stood on the porch until the cold settled into his boots, until the silence returned thick and heavy. The kind that used to be familiar but now felt like it had claws. He once welcomed the quiet like an old friend, but now it sat on his chest like weight he couldn't shift. The cabin behind him hadn't changed, but it felt different, hollow somehow, like a body missing its heart. Inside, the hearth still smoldered. The smell of bread lingered faintly in the air. The little bench sat by the fire, abandoned, still carrying the warmth of a child who had claimed it as her own. Brant stared at it for a long time, then turned away, unable to bear the ghost of laughter that no longer filled the room. He didn't light the lamp that night. Let the dark come, let it swallow everything. By morning the snow was gone, melted into the soil like it had never tried to bury them. The birds sang louder now, bold in their declarations of spring. Brant walked the edge of the clearing with his rifle, not looking for danger, just movement. Something, anything. He checked traps, mended the fence, split wood, hauled water. But no matter what he did, the silence followed. By the third day, he stopped carving. On the 6th, he found Eden's fox under the cot. The ear had chipped off in the rush of their departure. He held it in his hand for a while, then placed it on the mantel beside the others. The figures didn't look like toys anymore. They looked like tombstones. That night Brant dreamed of fire, not the safe kind in a hearth, but wild, raging fire. He was running through trees, calling out names he didn't remember, voices echoing back that didn't belong to him. He woke before dawn, soaked in sweat, the memory of Eden's whisper loud in his ears. "He could protect us forever, Mama." He rose, pulled on his boots, and stepped outside. There were no signs, no visions, no dreams calling him forward. Just the emptiness that wouldn't let go. Nora didn't cry on the trail. Not once. Not when the trees closed behind them. Not when Eden asked the fifth time why Brant hadn't come. Not when the wind picked up again and reminded her how sharp spring could still feel. She rode in silence, fingers tight on the reins, eyes fixed on the road ahead. Isaac's claim lay past the valley near the Red Elk crossing. 10 more days, maybe 12. Enough time to think, to regret, to doubt. Eden was quiet too, but not sullen. She played with her new carving, the bird Brant had tucked into her coat. She talked to it sometimes as if it were him. "Don't worry," she'd whisper. "We're just going for a bit. Mama says maybe we'll come back." Nora never said that. But Eden believed it. The trail was slow. Wet earth made for hard travel. Twice the cart nearly tipped in the mud, and once the mule balked near a fallen log, eyes wide with something Nora didn't understand. But they made it through. Each day brought them closer to a place that was supposed to be a new beginning. By the 8th day, Nora spotted smoke on the horizon again, thin this time. A cabin, small, Isaac's. She didn't rush, didn't call out. She simply drove the mule forward, watching the past fall further behind with every step. Isaac Granger was older now, thinner. His beard had gone white and wild, but his eyes were still the same. He stepped out of the cabin as if he'd sensed her coming, and when he saw Nora and Eden, he dropped the hammer in his hand and ran. Nora let the reins fall. He met her halfway, arms wide. "Look at you," he breathed, voice cracking. "Look what the Lord brought back to me." She hugged him tightly, holding nothing back this time. Eden clung to her leg, uncertain, until Isaac knelt down and held out his hand. "You must be Eden," he said gently. The girl nodded. "You look just like your mama did when she was your age, except I don't remember her having that many freckles." Eden giggled. The sound broke something in Nora's chest. Isaac showed them inside. The cabin was simple but clean. A cot, a stove, shelves built from scrap wood, 2 blankets folded neatly in a chest. "I thought you might come," he said. "Didn't know when, but I prayed." Nora placed her hand on his. "Thank you." They settled in quickly. Isaac gave them the cot and took to sleeping on a pallet near the fire. Eden helped plant the small garden he'd cleared out back. Nora cooked, cleaned, mended his shirts. She should have been grateful, she was. But something kept her up at night. It wasn't the cold. It was the memory of Brant's hands, how gentle they'd been with Eden, how steady they'd been when danger came. It was the silence between them that had grown into understanding. It was the part of herself that had bloomed in that cabin, a version she hadn't known still existed. At night she stared out the small window, watching the stars above the ridge. Eden noticed. "Are you thinking about him?" Nora didn't lie. "Yes." "Do you think he's thinking about us?" Nora smiled sadly. "I hope so." Back on the ridge, Brant stood by the fire with the fox carving in his hand. He turned it slowly, the smooth grain catching the light. Then with sudden force, he threw it against the wall. It shattered. He stared at the pieces for a long time. Then he began packing. Isaac's land was good, the soil soft, the water clean. There were neighbors 2 miles west, a family of 6 with a boy Eden's age. Nora watched her daughter play with him one afternoon, their laughter carrying on the breeze. Isaac joined her on the porch. "She's healing." Nora nodded. "And you?" She didn't answer right away. Then softly, I left something behind, someone. Isaac studied her. You thinking of going back? She shook her head. I don't know, I shouldn't. He gave us everything and I walked away. Why? Because I was scared, she admitted. Because I thought safety came from blood, but I've never felt safer than I did in that cabin. Isaac didn't speak, just placed a hand on her shoulder. Then maybe, he said, it's not too late to go home. Brant reached the Red Elk crossing by dusk. He rode slow, the mule borrowed from a trapper he paid in cured hides. He didn't know if he'd find them, didn't know if he'd be welcome, but he rode anyway. By the time he saw the plume of smoke from Isaac's chimney, the stars were already out. He didn't go straight to the cabin. He watched from the trees. He saw Eden first, her small figure chasing fireflies in the yard. Then he saw Nora. She stood by the porch, hair loose, arms crossed, staring up at the night sky. He stayed hidden, unsure of what he was doing, unsure if he could face her. Then Eden looked up, froze. Brant, she cried and ran. Nora turned sharply, heart leaping into her throat. Brant stepped out of the shadows, hands raised slightly. Eden barreled into him, hugging his waist. You came, she whispered. Nora approached slowly, every breath catching on a knot of emotion. I wasn't sure you would, she said. I wasn't sure either, he replied. They stood there, the three of them, beneath the stars. Then Isaac opened the door. Well, he said, grinning, guess I'll set an extra place. Brant looked at Nora. Is there room? He asked. She smiled, tears spilling now unashamed. There always was. Brant stayed the night in the small barn behind Isaac's cabin. He didn't ask to be invited inside. He hadn't come for comfort. He'd come because something in him refused to settle. He tried to make peace with the echo of Nora's voice, with the memory of Eden's laughter bouncing off his cabin walls, but neither faded the way he expected. The silence he used to carry like armor had turned to ache, and when that ache became unbearable, he followed it. Now he sat on a rough pallet made of old blankets and straw, sharpening his knife more out of habit than need. The night air was damp but not cold. A gentle breeze swept in through the half-broken window, carrying the faint scent of roasted corn and pine smoke. He could hear them inside, the murmur of Nora's voice, the creak of floorboards, the soft clinking of dishes. He didn't expect anything, not thanks, not welcome, maybe just space to be near them again. Just as he was about to lie down, the barn door creaked open. Nora stood there, a lantern in one hand, her other arm wrapped in a shawl. The light caught in her hair, and for a brief moment Brant couldn't tell if he was still dreaming. You really meant to sleep out here? She asked. Brant shrugged, didn't want a crowd. You're not, she said. He looked at her then, really looked. She'd changed, or maybe not. Maybe he was seeing her clearly for the first time. The woman who had walked into his life half frozen and silent, carrying a child and a story she hadn't yet told, now stood strong on her own feet, framed in light, with nothing left to prove to anyone. I missed your silence, she said softly, stepping inside. Brant raised an eyebrow. She smiled. It always said more than most men's words. He set the knife down, didn't think I'd be missed. You were. She stepped closer, knelt beside him. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then she asked the question she'd carried for weeks. Why'd you come? Brant didn't move, because I couldn't stay still anymore. And now? I don't know. She reached for his hand. Her fingers slid over his knuckles, rough, scarred, strong. She turned his hand palm up and placed something in it. The fox carving. He stared at it. The ear was still chipped. I found the pieces, she said. Put it back together. Brant swallowed, throat tight. Why? Because I wasn't ready to let it go. The silence between them deepened, different now, full, heavy with meaning. Nora leaned in then, just enough that her forehead touched his, just enough that he closed his eyes. "I'm not asking you to follow us," she whispered, "but if you wanted to stay." "I do. We'd have you." When she pulled back, he opened his eyes. She was still there. "I'll go talk to Isaac," she said. "Tell him we'll need a larger cabin." Brant smiled, small but real. As she turned to leave, he called out, "Nora." She paused. "I never had family, not really, but if you'd let me." She turned back to face him. "We already have." The next week passed in a blur of rebuilding. Isaac called in neighbors from west of the ridge, a pair of brothers who helped clear land and raise beams. Brant worked from dawn to dusk, hands calloused and back sore, but he never complained. Nora cooked for the whole crew, laughter spilling out the kitchen windows as Eden stirred batter or snuck biscuits to the neighbor boy she'd taken a liking to. The new cabin rose fast, 2 rooms, a wide porch, windows facing the eastern hills. Brant carved the doorframe himself, etching tiny shapes along the edge. A fox, a mountain lion, a bird with wings spread wide. At the roof's peak, he hammered in a final piece of wood, a beam he'd carried from his old cabin, the one above the hearth, the one that had kept him alive through winters and silence. It belonged here now, among the laughter and life. One evening, long after the work crew had gone and the tools had been put away, Brant sat on the new porch beside Nora, watching Eden chase fireflies with bare feet. "She's different," he said. "She's home," Nora replied. Brant turned to her. "Are you?" Nora took his hand. "I am now." Inside the house, Eden's voice rang out. "Mama, Brant, come see." They followed her inside to find the girl standing beside the hearth, pointing. Brant had hung the fox carving above the mantel. Eden beamed. "It's ours now." Brant smiled. "It always was." But peace never lasts forever. 2 weeks later, a rider appeared. Dust-covered, horse-lathered, eyes sharp with fear. He rode into Isaac's clearing like he was being chased by death itself. Brant was the first to meet him. "Trouble?" he asked. The rider didn't waste time. "Raiders, South Valley. 5 cabins burned, took livestock, 2 girls missing." Nora emerged from the cabin, Eden clinging to her side. Isaac joined them, face hardening. "Same gang that came through last fall?" he asked. The rider nodded. "They're headed north fast." Brant looked toward the ridge. "That means us." Nora's breath caught. "Will they come here?" Eden asked. Brant crouched beside her. "Not if I have anything to say about it." She stared at him, trusting, unafraid. "You'll protect us?" He nodded. "Always." The neighbors were warned. Men gathered, rifles loaded, plans made. Brant took the high ridge, scouting the trails. Nora helped prepare bandages, filled canteens, stockpiled food. Eden sat by the window with her doll and the fox carving, whispering stories about how brave her mama and Brant were, how they'd saved her once, and would do it again. The night before the raiders were expected, Nora found Brant sharpening his knife by the fire. "Don't do anything stupid," she said. He didn't look up. "I won't." "I mean it." He paused. "I'm not going out looking to die, Nora." "But you would for us." He met her eyes. "Yes." She stepped close. "I don't want a hero. I want you here, alive." "I'll do my best," he said softly. She rested her hand on his chest. "You'd better." The attack came just before dawn. Brant saw them first, figures moving like shadows through the trees. He fired once, drawing their attention. Then all hell broke loose. Gunfire shattered the quiet, horses screamed, men shouted. Brant moved like a ghost, silent, precise. He picked them off from the ridge, then retreated down to the field. Isaac's boys held the front. Nora and Eden stayed locked in the cellar per Brant's orders with the revolver close. But one of the raiders broke through. He was young, desperate, wild-eyed. He kicked in the door, rifle raised. Nora fired first. The shot echoed like thunder. Brant burst in seconds later to find her standing over the body, hands shaking, eyes wide. "I had to," she whispered. He pulled her into his arms. "I know." They stayed like that for a long time. By mid-morning, it was over. 3 dead raiders. 1 wounded neighbor. Brant had a gash across his ribs and a bullet graze along his shoulder, but he stayed on his feet. The valley was safe for now. They buried the bodies, patched wounds, rebuilt what little had been broken. But something had changed. Nora saw it in the way Eden clung to Brant's hand. In the way the neighbors nodded at him with respect instead of fear. In the way Isaac stood beside him, shoulder to shoulder. That night, as they sat around the new table, Eden leaned her head against Brant's arm. "You really could protect us forever," she said. Brant looked at Nora. She smiled. "You already have," she said. It had been 3 weeks since the last gunshot echoed through the valley, and the land was blooming again, stubborn and defiant as ever. Wildflowers edged the fences where blood had darkened the dirt. The corn sprouted bright green against the black scars of fire, and every morning Eden ran barefoot through the dewy grass, chasing butterflies and singing half-made-up songs while Brant sharpened tools and Nora stirred batter inside their cabin. "I used to think I was too broken," he said, "too angry, too far gone." "You're not. I didn't know how to love, not without hurting." "You learned." He stared into the dark trees. "You saved us," Nora whispered. Brant shook his head. "You saved me." They sat in silence for a long time, watching the stars. And then, for the first time, Brant spoke the words he'd carried so long it had hurt to hold them. "I love you." Nora didn't look up. She just said, "I know." Then after a pause she added, "I love you too." He leaned down, kissed her hair and held her close. In the cabin, Eden stirred, rolled over and murmured in her sleep, "Told you he could protect us, Mama." Outside, the wind whispered through the trees like an old friend, carrying away the last of winter's ghosts. And the valley was quiet again. Not from emptiness. From peace. The sun had just crested over the ridge, painting the valley gold, when Brant stepped out onto the porch barefoot, coffee in hand, and let the morning settle across his shoulders. Dew clung to the tall grass, and the fields whispered with the hush of waking life. Chickens clucked lazily in their coop, and somewhere beyond the cabin, Isaac's mule brayed like it had done every day for the past month without fail. The rhythm of peace had become something he no longer feared, something he'd begun to trust. Inside, Nora stirred. He heard the familiar creak of the bed frame, followed by her light footsteps padding toward the hearth. The sound of flint striking stone reached his ears, and soon smoke curled from the chimney. These quiet rituals, her waking, Eden's humming in the next room, the low murmur of boiling water, the scrape of his own boots on the porch meant more to him now than he could say, more than he ever imagined they would. The days had begun to blur together in the best way. In peace, time wasn't sharp like it had been in the years of solitude. It softened, wrapped around them like the quilts Nora stitched through the quiet hours. Brant didn't miss the years before, not the silence, not the ache, not even the solitude. What he had now he'd never imagined for himself. He'd never believed he was allowed to want it. But God, he did. Every morning reminded him just how much. Eden ran out onto the porch with her boots untied and her braids swinging behind her. She clutched something in her hand, nearly bouncing with excitement. "Look," she said, holding out a tiny carving, a deer half-finished. Brant crouched, taking it gently from her. "You did this." She nodded. "With your old knife. Mama said it was okay." He turned it over in his hand. The lines were uneven, but it had shape, presence. She'd done it on her own, and he saw her pride blooming like the valley's first wildflowers. It's good, he said simply. Really? He nodded. Her eyes sparkled. Can I put it on the shelf? Course. She darted back inside, leaving the screen door swinging behind her. Brant watched her go, that strange knot of love and fear pressing against his ribs. He had never known a child could change a man so deeply without asking anything but truth in return. Nora came out not long after, tying her hair back, eyes still heavy with sleep. She's up early, she said. Brant sipped his coffee, was carving. Nora smiled. That girl's more like you every day. He looked at her. No, she's like you. Nora stepped beside him, slipped her hand into his. She's got the best of both. They stood like that for a while, breathing in the stillness. No raiders, no shadows, no past creeping back with blood in its teeth, just life. Simple, hard, good life. Later that afternoon, Isaac arrived on horseback, bringing with him a sack of seeds, a bottle of molasses, and a letter. It's from the sheriff in Alder Fork, he said, handing it to Brant. Brant unfolded the paper slowly, his brow furrowing as he read. He wants me to ride in, he said at last. Says he's short on men for the spring posse, needs someone who knows the ridge, someone he can trust. Nora leaned against the doorframe. You thinking about going? Brant stared at the letter, then out toward the hills. I told him I'd left that life behind, he said, but he's not wrong. I do know the land. Nora waited. Brant folded the letter, set it aside. I'll ride in, help him set the maps, but I'm not going back to that life. She nodded. Good. He looked at her, serious now. You sure? If I say no to this, I'm staying here, for good. No more disappearing into trees, no more running toward trouble just because I know how. Nora stepped forward, placed her palm on his chest. You've already done more than any man I've ever known. You don't have to prove anything. I'm not trying to prove, he said softly. I just want to build. She smiled, then start here. That evening, Brant rode out. Just a day's ride, long enough to keep his word, short enough not to feel like leaving. Nora and Eden watched him disappear into the trees, but neither of them cried. He promised he'd be back before sunset the next day, and this time when he said it, they believed him. Brant reached Alder Fork by midday. The sheriff, an older man named Clive with a busted knee and a half-decent heart, greeted him with a weary grin. Never thought I'd see the day, he said, shaking Brant's hand. Brant helped draw the maps, marked the trails he knew better than most men knew their own backyards. He told them where the land folded in strange ways, where the water ran too fast to cross, where men could vanish if they were clever and cruel. Then he left. On the trail home, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky orange and gold, Brant paused on a ridge that overlooked the valley. From there, he could see the faint smoke from their chimney, hear the echo of Eden's laughter if the wind hit right. He sat there a while, just breathing. He didn't need to go any farther. He'd already arrived. Back at the cabin, Nora was teaching Eden how to knead dough. The girl's fingers were sticky and clumsy, and flour dusted the tip of her nose. Brant will love this, she said. Nora smiled. He will. Eden looked out the window. He always comes back. Nora followed her gaze. Yes, she said softly, he does. When Brant returned, he didn't knock. He opened the door like it belonged to him, and it did. Eden ran to him first, throwing her arms around his waist. You're back. Always. Nora stood behind her, smiling. Brant leaned down, kissed her gently. I missed you, he said. I know. Years passed. The valley grew. Children were born, cabins were raised. The carving shelf by the hearth grew crowded, dozens of tiny figures, each with its own story. Eden grew taller, stronger, and eventually left for the schoolhouse in the next town over, promising she'd return each weekend. She always did. Brant grew older too. His limp worsened, his beard grayed, but his hands never stopped working. He built new chairs, new fences, a new cradle once. Because one spring morning, Nora stood in the doorway holding her stomach, tears in her eyes. Brant walked to her without speaking. She whispered, "I didn't think it was still possible." He laid his hand gently over hers, heart full. "It is now." When their son was born, Eden chose the name. "Clay," she said, "because he's soft now but strong when he sets." Brant laughed. "That sounds about right." He built the boy a cradle, carved a lion into the side. Nora placed it near the hearth. And in the quiet hours of the night, with the fire low and the wind gentle outside, Brant held the child in his arms and whispered stories about foxes and snow, about cabins in the storm, about women who knocked and men who answered. He told him the truth. That once a girl and her mother had come to his door. And everything had changed. They never became famous. No one wrote songs about them, no books, no plaques. But the neighbors spoke their names with respect. Children grew up hearing how the mountain man had once stood alone against raiders, how a widow had shot a man to protect her child, how the three of them had built something stronger than steel out of love, out of loyalty, out of wounds turned to wisdom. And when Brant's hair turned white, and Nora's hands shook too much to sew, Eden took over the carving. She taught her brother, then her children. The shelf grew so full they started putting carvings in windows, on porches, in fences. A fox always near the door. A lion over the bed. A bird above the hearth. Symbols of what had been. Proof of what still remained. One night, as the wind howled across the hills and the trees bowed low with snow, Nora leaned against Brant in their bed and whispered, "It's snowing again." He smiled in the dark. "It always does." "You remember the first time I knocked?" "I remember thinking you looked like you'd come out of the storm itself." "I did." Brant turned to her, his hand finding hers beneath the blanket. "And you brought the warmth with you." They fell asleep like that, hand in hand, the fire still crackling, the fox carving watching from the mantel. Outside the wind blew. But inside they were safe. Together. Forever.